Thanks for joining us for Wicked Wednesdays, everyone. And it's a very simple, easy check-in question, which is, how are you arriving for today's session? So I'm arriving with curiosity and an open mind. I have been hearing a lot about place-based and person-centered approaches and want to know more about what this means. I'm arriving excited and a little nervous. That was me. This is my first time hosting. That's why I'm a little nervous. And Bronia is looking forward to a stimulating conversation after a long and busy day. I'm arriving interested in the conversation and interested in this topic, learning new skills in IT. Tired but content. I'm very curious about tonight's topic. And too busy looking at notes. Pleased to be here, looking forward to the conversation. Our calling question, which is, how do we shift injustices and design for quality of life? And how do we shift the power away from government and back to people and families to create real lives? So we'll have a deeper conversation about that shortly, but over to you, Bronia.
Yeah, lovely. It's so lovely to be here with you tonight. I think in our world of busyness, sometimes we don't allow ourselves to stop and have really good quality conversations. And for me, that's the sort of thing that really stimulates me to do better work. So I think we all get caught up in the busyness of the day, whatever that means, whether it's, a person with a disability and family members just getting on with the day, people who are just getting on with their day, people who are working in the sector, who are just busy doing things every day. The whole thing around reflecting is somewhat challenging. So I think like opportunities like this, I think are really, really exciting, that we can actually take some time with some colleagues and just chat about things that, are important to us. And I think that's why when Michaela invited me, I thought, yeah, I'm really excited about doing that, around learning around some of this stuff with my colleagues and my peers. So I think for me, the question is, it's just a wicked question, isn't it? It's to get us through hump day. We've got a juicy couple of questions. How do we shift injustices and design for quality of life? And then how do we shift the power back to people to create real lives in community? I think probably, two more juicier questions you couldn't get. So let's have a bit of a go at some of my thinking around this. And first of all, I want to talk about social justice as opposed to injustice. And I want to say how fortunate I think we are to be here in Australia when it comes to social justice. We've got a lot to be proud about, and I think that most of us are on a true reconciliation pathway with Indigenous Australians. We're on a pathway towards developing systems for people which are fair and just. And I think overall, we're all just striving towards equitability. It's a long journey, but I think we're all in this together. And I think COVID has made us closer in doing that work together too. We're a nation who loves to support the underdog and to give people a bit of a fair go. And despite all the challenges that we have, I think, again, particularly in the COVID world, we're very fortunate here in Western Australia that we still are able to go about our daily lives without any restriction. Very fortunate when, colleagues in other states are doing it much tougher than us, and so recognize that. But I think probably the fact that we have so much empathy for people who are doing it tough, I think makes us who we are in Australia. It makes us realize that we are in this together. The whole thing around having a fair go, and just the whole process of how we go about supporting people to be able to do this work well is something that I'm really interested in. Of course, although patting ourselves on the back, there's still lots of work to be done. So there are a lot of people still facing many injustices in the world. For example, people with disabilities, you know, even despite the significant investment that's been made through the NDIS, we're still seeing a big push towards congregated settings, you know, in order to make, you know, under the guise of scheme sustainability. You know, we see people being pushed back into lives of segregation to fit within the system. So how do we go about challenging that injustice is something that I'm really keen to have a conversation with you about tonight. I'm always curious how we see people who are paid to deliver services, you know, into the community, to access community. What does that even mean? Access community is something that as services we have put a label on. I mean, I don't access the community. You know, I go out and I do things, and I go and have a coffee, and I'll do this, and I'll take my kids here, and I'll do this, but I don't see myself as accessing the community. Service land has got a lot to do with putting labels on people and almost labeling what it is we do to fit into systems. I'm really keen around challenging that and pushing back on that and how we can do things better. The whole idea around, you know, freely given relationships and being a citizen in community, I think is really, really essential. It's much easier to, you know, to get some funding, to be able to get a support person who can take a person to access community than it is to find ways for people to be welcomed within community and in genuine relationships with people, and providing opportunities for people to showcase their talents and gifts that the community would welcome. So I think we have this situation here with more resources being available to people in the community that's actually stifled community connecting back, because it's seeing that there are other people who are filling the lives of people with disability, and people tend then not to step in. So in terms of where we're at, I sort of really feel that we're at a point where we need to go back to the drawing board and focus our support towards people and families, sort of taking back this control to create inclusive communities. Because I think the answers are within people, and it's not with governments and service providers. Over the last few years, I think that we have seen people who were in feeling very empowered, actually being slipping back into the whole point of giving their power back to governments and service providers. I see some of that slippage happening, whereas we had a very strong family leadership community here in Western Australia, and over the last few years we have seen some slippage there, where people have been so focused on getting into the NDIS that we've seen a bit of a difference in trying to get good plans, as opposed to, you know, our commitment to, you know, getting good lives. And we're trying to shift that focus back over the next couple of years going forward. You know, I mean, I think it's always unfortunate that people need to state how bad things are in people's lives to get what it is that they want to get support. And I think that's been a bit of a shift. We have, over the years here in Western Australia in particular, worked very hard on strengths-based supports and, you know, creating a picture of the good life for a person, to be now in a situation where we're having to get people to retell their stories so that they can get the support that they need to be able to do what it is that they want to do. And so putting people at the center of their own lives and being helpful in building and designing ways that are focused on quality of life, for me, is where we need to head in the future. So in our organisation, we've been very keen to build the narrative, or rather rebuild the narrative, of why individual and family leadership is really important, and have a focus on strategies towards achieving this. So our organisation is a peer-led community organisation. So our board is 75% of people with lived experience are on our board. So they lead the direction in which we support people and families on the ground. So I think the whole focus around having our focus around the board leading us and the strength in our board being that they are user-led is something that we have constitutionalized now, realizing how important it is. When I step away from the organization at some stage, then, you know, it's always in the constitution of the organization that we will be a peer-led organization. So, and I think that that's something that we should all be striving towards, to make sure that the governance levels, as well as people on the ground, are all led by and driven by people, with individuals and people with a disability, or whatever your cause is. So the other thing is we have a real focus on supporting peer networks, and as a way of building capacity and driving family leadership. And we actively promote and facilitate peer-to-peer connection. I think we've got about 15 groups up and running now here across WA of different support networks, peer networks, where people are sort of coming together to share their stories, support one another, and empower each other on this journey to keep people at the center of their own lives. So that's just a little bit of reflection, though. I'm sort of thinking whether the injustice in Australia, like other countries, obviously COVID-19 has had a huge impact on our communities. And as I said, we've still got a number of states that are locked down. In reflecting this, I'm interested to hear about the additional, what you see as the additional injustices that people with a disability face. Are they do we have almost like a double disadvantage here happening as a result of people with disability facing the COVID world? And I'm interested around what that means. And, you know, is that any different to other communities who are also struggling with isolation, loneliness, restrictions? I'm keen to have that discussion with you to see, you know, are people with disability actually further disadvantaged because of their disability at times like COVID, or is this a community as one that we're all really struggling with the whole idea around, you know, what lockdown means for everyone and in isolation? So those are some of the things that I'm really sort of interested in hearing about. So just to think, to finalize, like as I said, we're really keen on understanding the power of how we can connect people and to their communities so that they lead communities, and that it's not led by service providers and governments saying what we need to do. It's led by people and families, and us supporting them to do that. One of the challenging things that we've got at the moment, though, is people over the last few years have been through a hard time, and energy levels we're seeing are quite low. I'm not sure if other people are finding that, but like from fighting the good fight, people are feeling that they don't have as much energy that they had in the past to do this, to do the capacity building work that we know needs to happen for this question to people be able to live good lives in the community. So we are going to, here in WA, how we're going to tackle that is that we are going to try and rebuild family leadership as a viable and sustainable resource for people and families. You know, kick-starting that with some really great activities, not around the NDIS, not around anything, but with the sole focus around how can we, as people and families, create inclusive communities for ourselves and not rely on others. So those are some of the questions that I've got. I don't know that I've got any pearls of wisdom or stories. It's just I've got a number of things that I'd like to talk to you about. I'm happy to answer any questions around, you know, our work, some of the things that we've been doing, how we focus on this question of families leading governments and providers, as opposed to being led by. as the focus of our work.
Fantastic. Thanks, Bronia. That was great. Dee and I have done a bit of harvesting, and we've got quite a few sticky notes on our story gems. So I might just quickly go through those. So look at those fabulous sticky notes. This is great. And all those fabulous little icons and symbols. So we've got slowing down and having deeper conversations, the idea of making time for this because it doesn't exist elsewhere. NDIS scheme sustainability equals segregation. The issue of using good language to convey at times intangible and ever-present complexity. How do we access community if we are already living in communities? Supporting people so they can do the work well. Supporting people to do this work well. And how can we create communities ourselves? People are so focused on getting good funding rather than creating good lives. Being a citizen in community freely. Serviceland loves putting labels on people. Putting people at the center of their own lives. We are a nation that loves to support the underdog. Do we need to go back to the drawing board? Connecting people to communities to lead their communities? Do we have the energy to keep up the good fight? Understanding the power of people connecting their communities. How can we not rely on governments? How do we have a double disadvantage for people with a disability facing COVID? Driving family leadership. 75% of peers on the board. There is such power in this. We've worked very hard in WA in strengths-based supports. How do we go back to the drawing board? The answer is with people, not service providers, and not with governments. And what does peer-led really mean? And more storytelling. So is there anything you'd like to add, Alex?
Thanks, Meredith. Thanks for reading through those. Yeah, look, a lot of those thoughts or similar thoughts were going through my thinking as well. I'm actually more than happy for the conversation to evolve out of those.
Great.
My line of thinking was kind of hitting, you know, and connecting well with all of those thoughts.
Okay, fantastic.
If I can add one thing, there was one kind of major thought that kept on coming back to self. You know, I know that it's really, you know, the important thing is to refer to we, and there's something very powerful in that. But I've recently been thinking about that concept of we. It always starts with I. I think that we, you know, it comes from my thinking, and that's sort of linked me a lot to my personal responsibilities as a practitioner and as a thinker as well. So something along, you know, having a look at ourselves. As individuals, can add value to the whole if we can all support one another. And I know that family leadership concept probably, Bronia, has connections to that, is working with the individuals, not just the participants of services, but with families, as you were saying. And I think that's where the practitioners need to focus as well, the support workers, the therapists, in that, kind of getting a little bit of a greater sense of purpose within themselves to be supporting individuals. There's always growth towards self, and all of the philosophies and theories I've been exposed to suggest that, you know, the better you understand yourself, the better you can understand others. So for me, that area of education is really important for our communities.
I agree with you, Alex. I think absolutely, and I think the focus that we have around family leadership is so in Australia. I think with the NDIS, clearly we've been focusing on the person with a disability, the individual, and I think that some of the power that that is within those individuals in their lives is having strong family members around them. And getting the outcomes depends very much on them being supported by people who love them the most, rather than paid supporters, obviously. So I think, you know, we must get the power of the people, power of the conversation, and the power of the voice to the individual, but never forget that of the family.
Okay, so we might jump into our World Cafe conversation.
I'll kind of host and guide the conversations for all of you through the 2 questions. Yep.
Sounds good.
Okay, so on element 6, we've got the conversation number 1. So just to open it up, and feel free to put sticky notes on. For Alex, if you want to speak it, the question is, how do we shift injustices and design for quality of life? Have an open conversation and I will time you and then shift you into the next question. So open floor.
So I've decided to go with a couple of icons, the fire icon and the bomb icon. Sometimes I feel like working I work as a support coordinator, so working in the NDIS system, sometimes I feel like I want to throw a bomb under people. It's not to be done in a violent manner. I certainly don't want to cause harm to people, but I want to shift bad attitudes and I want to shift stuck attitudes.
Thank you.
I think that during Bronia's conversation, she really highlighted the importance of, taking ownership of social justice rather than relying on service providers and government to do the work on behalf of us. But I think that there exists this very real issue that we have almost become accustomed with outsourcing our rights and our responsibilities to others. And if we start to think about complexities, it is even a heavier reality. I work predominantly in the anti-racism sector with international students and with immigrant women. And there is this tendency to firstly not belong, this sense of not belonging that is very deep ingrained in Australian history. And then there is this sense that, we are caricatured or stereotyped as a funding kind of box. And therefore we only require certain services and we only need certain things. And slowly we become to see ourselves in that formula or in that formulaic framework where these are our needs, these are the solutions, and we are somehow supposed to assimilate ourselves to that. So I sort of think that, we need to do, as Alex was saying, there is a lot of work of deprogramming and getting communities to feel accustomed with talking about things with each other, because that is so rare. We don't have these conversations with each other. And I don't know how it's going to happen because there is a lot of cultural issues in that as well. But I think that deprogramming is definitely, I think, is crucial to the shift.
Thanks, Elizabeth.
So can I just reflect on something that sort of popped into my mind?
Please.
And around the whole notion of, so particularly around the whole consumer-driven world that we're living in at the moment, in terms of consumer directed care, person-centered approaches, all of that. And some of the injustice that I feel that is happening is around people, the governments have sort of said, if we push back and give the resources back to the people, then our solutions will come. Okay. And I absolutely think that is an outcome where we want to get to. But I think what we're stymied with at the moment is that we've got consumers that are not necessarily, I don't like to use the word consumers, but people who have power being given to them, not knowing how to exercise the choice and control. So change doesn't happen. So somebody's been given a resource and said, oh, okay, so we understand the best way about doing this is that you're at the center of your own lives. We're going to support you. Here's some money, off you go. Now, what you do with that is really dependent on your knowledge, skills, capacity to be able to do something with it. I use the analogy and the picture of a shopping trolley. Some shoppers are better than others. you know, like, so, and it depends on what you know, do you know what day the bargains are coming out? Do you know where to shop online? Do you know the people who know the people to be able to ask the question about where to get the good products? If you don't have that, you actually still got the same social injustice. You've got social injustice of people not being able to exercise power, choice and control because they don't know what to do with it. And I think that's one of the areas that we really need to really work hard on, is that building capacity people so that they understand this control that they're being given and can exercise it accordingly.
I absolutely agree with that, because I have been in a lot of situations where we just assign community leadership to leaders that don't know what leadership means. And often there is this assumption by government bodies that that is the voice, that is the voice of X community, and the multiplicity and the complexity gets lost because that person also doesn't know how to articulate their own experience and is very accustomed to using those buzzwords that we all know that are very, key in grant applications to convey a point and to, demonstrate the urgency of a point of view. And I think that it's really important for, social justice, advocates to invest in civic education, actually, as Bronia was saying, transferring the knowledge from universities and from schools within our communities and creating, how do we speak to our local members of parliament? How do we write letters? Even skills like public speaking, right? Integrating that into local English language learning programs, making language learning programs more practical and civic orientated. I feel like there's so much opportunity to integrate these self-empowerment skills. Yeah, completely agree.
I agree with you, Elizabeth. And I think that the government has sort of listened to what people are saying around this social injustice, and they have done that. Let's put the power back to local communities, where it belongs. So they're talking about and delivering what they think's going to work to embed choice and control power at the local level. But there's just this it's so dependent on the person or that community's ability to be able to exercise that to shift the injustice, because it can actually just add more injustice, but with more resources. I think about some communities where, where some communities where they have been given resources that they have never had before for many, many years. And they haven't done the best with those resources because they haven't known what to do with them. So they've always done what they've always done with the resources that they've been given. And it hasn't necessarily achieved the outcome because people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
So nice segue as well from that bit of a conversation into, if you click on element 7 for the second conversation, how do we shift the power away from the government and back to people and families to create real lives? In whatever capacity that is, in parts of what you already talked about, but maybe expand a bit more about shifting the power. Something you said, Bronia, reminded me of, because my work is in asset-based community development, and we talk a lot about, power ladders. And what does that look like when you've got people at the bottom who have no control and they're at a kind of consultation stage? And how do we shift up the ladder to where people have real choice and control? So you reminded me of that, shifting that power. So let's have a bit of a conversation. And just with full transparency, I have another unconference call to join at 8 o'clock, and Meredith's going to continue on. So I will stay here right until the last moment. But yeah, feel free, please, to share. How do we shift the power away from government?
Thanks, Dee. We were in a conversation last week around what would we, if we had a magic wand, what would we like to see and what would we like to do, and how, would we change things? And I said that I would like to see the NDIS have, like your organisation, Bronia, have at least 75% of people with a disability leading it. And I'd like to give power back to the people with a disability and allow them to build their own plans and decide when they need to roll over and when they need to have an extension and all those sorts of things, obviously within reason. But I think being in the hands of bureaucrats is very dangerous.
Especially when being able to communicate with the NDIS is so hard when you follow the channels and your email isn't going to even be opened for 7 weeks. For families, it's okay for families who can be assertive and who do have the power to speak up, but for those that send their message and think it's being received and they're just so disheartened when they receive no response, not realising that it's not even being looked at.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of power in peer support too, you know. I have a son with a disability and I know when, you know, he's 23 now, so when he was first born, you know, you're thrust into this entire new world and you have no idea what it's bringing because, you know, on the one hand, you're thrust into this medical model that's telling you to, you know, tick all their boxes when you don't want to be ticking their boxes. But I also feel that, you know, if I was able to meet some families who were doing things differently, you know, and really forging their own way through their journeys, that would have been really inspirational to me to go, oh. And that's what I did learn along the way. You know, I did hear about other families and I did witness other families doing things differently and going, well, they're not doing it, you know, by the book. I want to do that, you know. So I think having those people go before you and forging new ways and new paths, and often they do it very quietly. They're not full of fanfare and advertisements, you know, they're usually the quiet ones. And I think we have a lot to learn from those peers.
We were lucky enough with my daughter's journey to come across an organisation called Pledge that totally changed the trajectory for her. We were in, you know, the segregated school. I was coming across information, but my husband wasn't. I was you know, being a mum out and about in circles that often fathers don't get to. And they were so inspiring as a group, demonstrating what can be possible. And it absolutely changed our life to the point where my daughter is becoming a leader within our community as to now that she's 20 and looking at building her own business and out there and amongst it. And she's volunteering and just really it just shows like the power of that, us coming across that sort of leadership, and then we try to pass that on again. And now, I mean, I work as a support coordinator as well, and I've served on government boards, and you know, it's opened doors for us to be able to pass on information to other families.
Yeah. Great, thanks, Sandy.
I think one of the things for me is like, so I've just put on the board there, like a concerted effort to support people to understand that they actually have power. Because I think a lot of people don't realize the power that they have. I'm thinking about recently, again, it's in the sector that we're working with, in the disability sector, but you know, there was recently an amazing people power push back on government who were going to be introducing what were independent assessments on people's lives. And you know, families just said, no, this is not okay. People and families said this isn't okay, and they pushed and they pushed and they pushed, and they got to where they needed to go. And that was such a significant push because they had the power So once they realized, now, I mean, I use that as an example because, you know, that's so much power in the hands of people with disability or people who are disadvantaged, that if you can put it together, that the power that people have to make change, and it is immense. And I think people just don't realize that they have power. So a lot of our work is a big concerted effort to tell them and let them know how much power that they have and how they might go about using it well.
Yeah, I agree, Bronia. I find that families get very burnt out and disillusioned, you know, particularly if they do try and speak up. Oftentimes they're either squashed or not heard, or it's not valued or appreciated. And there's only so many times you can do that before families sort of go. "Oh."
And sorry, yeah, I didn't mean to speak over you there, but I agree with you. But I think what's happening is that people are being picked off one person at a time.
Yeah.
Whereas if they realize that there is strength in numbers
Yeah.
and connection, you know, it's easy to be picked off and feel like, and have your confidence, you know, doubted when people are saying, no, you can't have that, or you can't do that. But when there's a group of people together who are challenging that,
Yeah, exactly.
and feeling that they're empowered, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Power to the people. Isn't that what John Lennon
Absolutely, that's what
said?
I'm saying. Power to
Yeah.
the people. We just have to let people know that they've got power, and how, and support them to know how to use it well.
I totally agree. From my own upbringing and also work, a lot of immigrant communities feel that they should be forever thankful, rather than critically questioning their environment or their situation. They should be thankful and grateful and accept what has been given to them, because it is better than anything that they could have imagined before. And I think that in that, I also highlight the issue of nuance. That is very much a generational, I guess, understanding of the immigrant community. Whereas, although I'm a first generation migrant, you know, I had the benefit of being first in my family in a number of things. And I feel like I have more autonomy to critically question in a number of ways. But I feel as though in highlighting that nuance, what also happens is that we enter into this challenge where, you know, how can we work with, you know, in my own work, the struggle is, how can I connect different generations? How can I have different generations in one space? And within that, you know, different genders, different sexualities, different abilities, and come up with something that unites us, but also that allows us to be heard. Because I think that one of the key issues with shifting power away comes with, you know, coming together, coming as we are, with all of our, you know, disadvantages, challenges, and opportunities. And sometimes it's just easier for us to be clumped into, you know, the gender group, or the immigrant group, or the disability group, or the mental health, you know, advocacy group. It is really difficult for us to come together. And I think that at times government more power, because that's how their programs are structured, around silos. I don't know, that's, yeah.
Yeah, I agree, Elizabeth. It's like they strip away the humanness of a person, you know, the systems.
Some good ideas in there.
It's been very robust discussion. It's been great.
I think some of the power shifted with social media, with like, as a family member, you can bounce off, you see so many more ideas now, you're not feeling in the dark. It's such a powerful tool. I think it's an amazing tool, you know, for people who want to learn, who just want to suck up the ideas and take those little pearls of wisdom from everywhere, and for people that just want to lurk and watch and learn without.
Yes, I like that. Lurk and watch and learn. We should have that. I'm going to write that down. Lurk, watch and learn. That's gold.
That's what I'm good at.
I think we've all done it, haven't we, on social media?
Yeah,
I think it's really, I think that's another thing around like the power of those social media is for like never before, people are able to make changes and have their voice heard very, very quickly by just setting up something that's a social media campaign. We've never had that before. And I think that I think we're probably going to, I think the government is underestimating the power of social media going forward, because I think that once people get the hang of it, watch out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I think that's really been a good session.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for contributing, everyone. And our checkout question is, how are you leaving today's session? So there we go. How are we leaving today's session? Excited to be hearing big picture ideas. Tonight's conversations have been inspiring, reprogramming, redesigning, capacity building. Thank you for sharing and creating this space. The key is learning from one another in safe and culturally aware environments. Greater motivation and energy to keep going. Motivated to come together and hear more stories from peers. Still lots of questions. More energized than I was when I came in. Yay! So much food for thought. Hopeful. Still lots of work to do to shift power, but we are on a journey and reassured. It's been great hearing ideas in your mind, being heard, strengthened and extended by others. Fantastic.
That was great, folks. I really enjoyed the conversation tonight. Thank you for joining in. I'm not really the best speaker around this sort of stuff, so I just was looking forward to a conversation with you guys, and I hope that you got something out of it too.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and for being our storyteller, Bronia. You did a beautiful job, and you've certainly generated a lot of robust discussion around this topic, and there is certainly a long way to go.
Bronia and Elizabeth, to you both, thank you very much. I absolutely loved listening to you tonight. I really have been inspired by both of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. It's been lovely to meet you, and Alex.
Likewise.
Sandy, I know you.
Thanks so much,
you.
everyone. Take
Thank
care,
you.
and
Good
we
night.
might see you again another time.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night. Bye.
Bye now.
Bye.